Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Peggy West, your organizer of the webinar for today. And I do apologize. I am not able to do this with a video today, but I do want to get started pretty quickly here. And thank you for waiting. First, I want to welcome everyone and say Happy New Year. And thank you for joining. I also want to welcome Paul Overton and the panelists. We've got Philip Joseph, the attorney today from Baljanik, and we also have Ben Messerschmidt from Epic Forensic Engineering. I try to do 2 or 3 virtual webinars each month and hope you will continue to join us. Most of the webinars are recorded, and this one will be recorded. So if you registered, you have to get off and you can't attend the full webinar. We will send the recording out following the webinar to all who actually registered, not just attended, but who also registered. And you can share this with the rest of your board members. I'm sure we have many board members on today, so I wanted to say and recognize you, say thank you. My hat's off to you all for stepping up to the plate for your communities, volunteering your time in this difficult time of many legislative changes. You are running a business, as you know, and that's enough. But now we have new laws and new ones coming also. I also want to thank the association managers for your time taken to choose to join our webinar today. I know you have other choices. This is a CEU credit for you, and this will be on your license and posted within about 2 or 3 weeks by the Overton team at Paul Overton's company. Now I want to take a short moment out to recognize our 3 fallen soldiers from Iran and also the 40 others injured in just a short moment of silence. We are free because of their service, and God bless America. Okay, some housekeeping. You can enter your comments on the chat box and questions from the panelists and for our moderator today in the Q&A box. We will answer them all if time permits. If not, we will be sending out a sponsor sheet with all of the panelists' info as well as today's sponsors. So let's get started. I want to introduce our sponsors who have invited you today in the following order. First, I want to recognize Ventium Software. Today we have Yasmin Johannes. She's the marketing manager. She's also IT support for the webinar. Tell us about yourself, Yasmin, and the company. What do you do for communities?
Hi, everyone. Today, Leila will be presenting Ventium, so I'll let her do it.
Thanks, Yasmin. Thank you for being here as well. My name's Leila. I'm head of marketing customer success here at Ventium. Ventium is a software company. We provide HOA websites and portals for HOAs and condominiums across North America. We've been in the market for 10 years now, and we're super excited to be sponsoring this webinar and to listen to everything that the panelists have to say.
Thank you, Leila. I couldn't see you. I apologize. I can only see one person at a time. One thing I do want to mention here is that in the new legislator session that's evolving right now, they are going to try to pass a law that says that all condominiums with 25 units or more will have to have a website. So Ventium would be a great place to go. References are telling us that they are also very affordable. So that's good for your budget. Next, I want to mention Best Roofing. We have Diana Alert on. She's the business development manager. Diana, tell us about yourself and the company.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Peggy. I'm Diana Allard. I've been with the company for 4 years, and the company has been in business for 45 years. So it's a family-owned company. It's going on the 3rd generation, so we're not going anywhere. And anything that you need, from just like a simple inspection to find out the life expectancy of the roof, to like a maintenance program, re-roof, recovery, repairs, anything and everything from any manufacturer. We are approved by anyone out there. I'll be more than happy to help you. And if you're part of this class today, I'm offering a free roof estimate for anyone who is part of this today. So I'm going to be putting my information. I'm sure Peg is going to give it to you too. Just email me, contact me, and I will be more than happy to help you. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Okay, awesome. Okay. All right. So next I want to introduce Ben Friedman, the president of City Quiet Windows and Doors. Ben, tell us about yourself and what your company does for associations.
Thank you, Peggy. My name is Ben Friedman. I am the president and owner of City Quiet Windows and Doors. City Quiet Windows and Doors provides turnkey white glove installation services for all window, door, storefront, and railing projects. We are very aware of what's going on here in our South Florida industry as far as milestone inspections and the structural reserve studies. And if anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns, I'd be more than happy to share whatever information I have with them. So thank you for having me.
Great
Okay,
company,
awesome.
great service, great quality. Thanks, Ben.
Yes, thanks, Paul, too. Okay, you might also refer Ben to your contractors. That's something that the boards can do also, and managers. Next, I want to introduce Erica D'Alessandro. She is in business development for Nuvo Elevators. Erica, tell us about yourself, and maybe you want to share your exciting news.
I don't think Erica's here.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, Nuvo Elevators is going to offer some education classes, and they're the only elevator company doing that. So, all right, moving on to Vice Painting and Consulting. Gene Ponder's on. He's the vice president. Gene, tell us about yourself and the company.
Gene's here. Gene is missing.
Oh, he's missing. I'm sorry. I thought you said he's here. Okay. How about Heidi Larson? Is she on today? Business Development Executive for Property Services with Florida Paint.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Awesome.
So my name is Heidi. I'm sorry it's so dark in the back. I'm sitting in a parking garage. My last meeting ran late, but we've worked with Paul, oh goodness, I would say at least the last almost 8 years that I've been with Florida Paints. We're a paint manufacturing company. We offer a 10-year waterproof warranty that Paul's used on a number of his projects. Basically what happens is, you guys can come to me. I've worked with Paul in the very beginning of even just going to board meetings and speaking with you guys about the repaint process once it gets to us. Paul will have us come in. We do a specification where we will actually go on site, walk the property, see what he's going to be doing, where he needs us, and what what the substrates are that he'll be applying the coatings to. We'll provide that specification for the community. And then from there, we are actually on site the entire time. So we visit once a week and we do on-site millage tests. We'll do pH tests if needed on new stucco to make sure that it's ready to go. And we turn all of these reports over to Paul to provide for you guys. I love working with him. He makes my job super easy, but we always do free color renderings if you're going to be switching the colors during the repaint process. We do standard repaints, we do construction defects, we'll do perimeter walls, pool houses, we do floor coatings, all of it. So if it's any kind of coating whatsoever needed on your property, we even have paint stripes for parking lots and things like that. So anything that you guys need, we'll provide, and we'd love to help you out.
Okay.
Thank you, Heidi. Heidi's company sells a high build waterproof coating that I put on 99.9% of my projects. And it's amazing. I've had almost zero callbacks, and we're going to keep using it until the wheels fall off.
Love it. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, great. What a great team there. Okay, great. I'd recommend you also just from hearing the commercial. I also want to introduce City National Bank. We have Michelle Sidlowski, Vice President of Association Relationship Banking. Michelle, tell us about yourself and the bank. What do you do for associations?
Hi, Peggy. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Sidlowski, and I am the Assistant Vice President of Association Banking. City National Bank of Florida is headquartered in Coral Gables. We are the second largest Florida-based bank. We only do business in Florida. We serve over 4,000 associations throughout the state. I'm based in Tampa, but we have 33 branches on the East Coast. And there are 4 more of me on that side of the state. So we serve the entire state, full service association products from deposits, lockbox, reserve accounts, ICS, to lending. We are lending. We do have, we can work with 558 claims if there's funds needed until the settlement comes through. So if there's any questions on getting funds, we know this is can be a strain on associations. So if there's, you have any questions about lending, we're certainly here to help. So thank you for being here and thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thanks so much,
Michelle.
Michelle. Okay.
Peggy, we have Maddie from Vice Painting if you want to give her opportunity to speak.
Sure. Come right on. Let's hear about what Vice Painting is doing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie. I'm the new Director of Marketing and Business Strategy for Vice Painting. I greatly apologize for my absence at the beginning. I was on the wrong link. So I joined instead of a panelist, or a sponsor as an attendee for the webinar. So I apologize. Again, so I'm new with the company. I just started a month ago. I've been in the industry about a year and a half now. So I am super excited to use my knowledge for the painting world. Vice Painting is an awesome company. We do a lot of great things. Obviously, painting is in our name, so that's our bread and butter. We do exterior repaints of HOA, condo associations, and we do things as far as, pressure washing. We do sidewalk pressure washing. We do weatherproofing of buildings, minor repairs, in order to complete the paint project the proper way. We work with a lot of great people, and we are here for any of your painting needs. And if you want to give us a call, we can come out, do a walkthrough of your property, give you an estimate, and we'll give you the service that you deserve. So give me a call and give Dean a call. Dean couldn't make the meeting today. He is out on a property right now. But anyway, I'm here if you need anything. Thanks so much.
Okay, Maddie, well, welcome aboard. Yes, thank you so much. I look forward to working with you and more webinars ahead. Last but not least, I want to introduce a company that has an awesome reputation, many, many years in the business. I want to introduce Patty J. She's a partner at J.R. Fraser. Patty, tell us about yourself and what J.R. Fraser does.
Hey, everybody. We do a reserve study and SIRS for, condominium and homeowner association. We're in business for over 30 years, and our reports are very detailed and easy to understand. And we also do not do any subcontract work. So the person who goes out on site and a reserve analyst who's the one who's going to be finishing the report, so they knows what's, everything with the association. And we also offer a free Zoom call after the reports are done that association can call, or they can invite our reserve specialists to a board meeting so they can explain how our reports work and how they can implement in their budget as well. Thank you.
Awesome. So we all know reserves are high on the priority list right now. So give them a call. They have lots of experience and a really nice team to work with. So thank you, Patty, for joining us today. All right, you're certainly welcome. Now I want to introduce Paul Overton. He's the CEO of Overton Construction and Consulting. He's also moderating today's moderator. And also, Paul had a vision, and he started the Overton Network in November of last year, and he's offering education updates and construction information about the new laws. He's bringing on legal panelists such as today, and he's going to have monthly related topics. I also want to make honorable mention of Sherry Hall, his Vice President of Business Development at Overton. Sherry is the wind beneath their wings, the way Paul discusses it. So Paul, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our other panelists.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you all the sponsors. Thank you for speaking about your company, and thank you for supporting us. It's been a big help, and we really do appreciate it. So first off, today's topic is going to be on 558 construction defect claims, and we're very fortunate to have two of the giants from this industry with us today. We have Ben Messerschmidt from Epic Engineering, Epic Forensic and Engineering, and we have Philip Joseph from Ball Janik. And I don't even know, like, I wouldn't have a guess of how many cases that the two of them have worked on combined, but it's probably in the thousands. So we're very, very fortunate to have them on today as we work our way through this topic. And Philip, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you everyone for appearing, and Paul and sponsors for coming today. I am a partner at Ball Janik. Ball Janik is a multidiscipline firm that specializes in representing owners of property with construction deficiencies and with insurance coverage. Those are our two specialty areas. We have offices in Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. We have 40 lawyers and paralegals that all we do is specialize in representing owners of properties with defects that need to go through that process, and insurance coverage expertise. We represent clients throughout the state of Florida. We have approximately, to give you an example, we have probably 300 cases right now, multi-million-dollar cases throughout the state of Florida with construction defects is our expertise. The thing that makes us different from other law firms is that, one, we've done it for many years. I've been practicing for 35 years, and this has been my specialty. And on top of that, through our methodology of handling cases, our cases typically settle within 2 years, maximum 3 years, between the combination of litigation expertise and the insurance coverage expertise that we bring to bear there. So that's a little background about me and my law firm.
Thank you, Philip. I met Ball Janik and Philip when I think I was in Florida for about a week, and I showed up at their office, and we've worked together ever since then. Okay, Ben Messerschmidt. Ben, I don't think you need any introduction, but we've worked with you on several high-rise cases, forensic investigations, facade evaluations, and you're one of the leading forensic and engineering companies in South Florida. Why don't you tell us about yourself?
First off, thank you very much for that nice intro. And so far, everybody's pronounced my last name correct, so that's even also a positive. So thank you, and thank you for everybody for this opportunity. So my name is Ben Messerschmidt. I'm an executive director with Epic Forensics and Engineering. Keeping this nice, short, and sweet. We're very true to the name of forensics and engineering behind me right here. So we use our forensic aspect of things to go ahead and number one, solve any sort of litigation-based claims you may have or are dealing with, and really take that on through to the engineering phase once any sort of cases are settled to correct those items. And to avoid those mistakes, potentially those design mistakes as well as construction mistakes that got you there in the first place. We tackle the entire state. We are a multidisciplinary, full-service engineering firm. So literally do everything from the forensics world to traditional plans, specifications, threshold inspections, special inspections, SIRS, milestones, and every other catchphrase that everybody's been bombarded with for the past 6 months or so. But anything engineering involving the condo and large-scale HOA realm, we're certainly here as an available consultant. We're going to be putting ourselves in your shoes as many times as we can, really trying to be a client advocate for you all and just try to get things done. We understand this is a people business, and that is a resounding pillar to the company. So with that, I look forward to this awesome conversation with you all.
Thank you, Ben. I've actually been in swing stages, swinging from high-rise projects in South Florida with Ben's team members. So it's been awesome to work with your company, Ben.
Thank you very
Peggy,
much.
should we move into the presentation portion of this webinar?
Yes.
All right. So just an introduction, Philip, Ben and I are going to be discussing construction defect claims. We call them construction defect claims up here in Central and West and North Florida. I think a lot of people call them just 558 claims in South Florida, but they mean essentially the same thing to all of us. So they're interchangeable. I thought it would behoove us if I put them both on here so everybody would know that they are using the correct term. We got quite a bit of ground to cover, quite a few topics. We did a dry run, and I think this could actually be a 4 or 5 hour presentation, but we're going to try to get it done for you in an hour. So without further ado, let's get to the first slide. Let me share my screen first. Can everybody see the screen?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
All right. So our first topic is normal maintenance versus construction defect items. And Ben, I'm going to let you kick things off. Could you explain to our audience what would be considered normal maintenance versus building deficiencies or defects?
Sure, absolutely. And we've got some good examples up here on the screen as well. I mean, the first one and easiest one is going to be exterior painting and sealing of your buildings, of your structures. Usually for a lot of these larger scale residential areas, as well as high rise, even on the beach, you're looking at from a painting cycle anywhere from even starting as early as 5 years, but realistically, I think you're hovering about 7 or 8 years as a painting cycle. Cleaning your roofs, cleaning your roof drains and your deck drains. That's certainly a maintenance item. For a time period of that, you probably want to be looking about twice a year at a minimum. I would suggest doing one before the fun and long, extensive rainy season that we tend to have in the summer times to make sure you're moving all that water away. Pressure washing to go ahead and basically allow items to perform as they were originally intended to perform. In the most general sense is what I would be considering normal maintenance. If there's just think about the same maintenance you'd be doing on your car as an easy example as well. I mean, you change the oil, you rotate the tires. You're maintaining its intended purpose from getting you from point A to point B without breaking down in between.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Philip, what's your take on normal maintenance versus defects? And I would like to mention 99% of the time, every time a construction defect or 558 claim is filed, the defense is going to argue that the homeowners or the board community did not take care and perform normal maintenance. And that's the reason for the defects. So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit, Philip.
Sure. Let me start off by saying that what is the definition of a product defect? I mean, construction defect, because we keep on saying defects, but if you look at what Chapter 558 and the Florida Code provides is that there are three types of deficiencies. One is that the product that was utilized in the construction is defective. Another one is the construction application, how it was installed was defective. And the last is a design defect. The engineer or architect, the way they designed how the building was going to be erected and the products were going to be used was defective. All these three types of deficiencies either violate the building code or they deviate from industry standards. So that in general is how you look at that. So it's not just construction defects. It could be the product that was installed, or in many circumstances, it's the way the engineer or the architect designed the construction. So there are examples that are given here that what defects entail. These are just, I mean, one of 100,000 types of defects that you can find on a project. And Ben can tell you, we've worked on enough projects where there are a lot of that are similar. When you're looking at a stucco-clad building, the stucco is installed incorrectly. Instead of 3 coats, they use 2 coats. The improper curing time, whether they attached it to the mesh correctly. There are so many ways of looking at the defects. So there are literally thousands of defects that are out there, and the defects are, again, product, construction, or design. And they can be not only in the structures that are erected, so the vertical buildings, they can also be in the civil side issues. It could be the way that the drainage is installed or designed. It could be the sidewalks, the driveways, the streets. So when you look at defects, we look at not only the erected buildings that may be defective, but also the civil side issues that make up the entire community. So when we do look at projects where we need the help of engineers like Ben's firm to assist us in identifying the defects. Some of them are obvious, some of them are not obvious, and we'll get into more detail later about doing destructive testing and an investigation, because as Ben will tell you later on, 90% of what is wrong, you can't even see. You have to look at how things were built up to what you're actually seeing. And most of those defects are behind what you're actually seeing. And then again, as Paul is absolutely correct, on every case that we've handled, there are two things that developers and contractors raise. They say, one, these aren't defects. This is just improper maintenance. The owners did not maintain their properties correctly. And it is important for an owner of a property to maintain their property. And if they don't, and they exacerbate defects, they can get a reduction in terms of their damages, because the defect may have caused some damage, but the owner failing to maintain the property has exacerbated the damages, and they're not going to get a court or a jury is not going to award you damages for something that you could have prevented or should have prevented with ordinary maintenance going forward. So in addition to raising the issue of maintenance, which is critical, they also raise the fact that the owners are too late. And we'll have a discussion later on about statute of limitations and statute of repose, because in every case that we handle, it's always the same thing. The owners fail to maintain properly, or two, the owners are too late. They sat on their hands too long to do that. So the maintenance is usually apparent, but the construction defects are not. And again, working with contractors and engineers to come up with a plan of what is ordinary maintenance, you work with them. Where I'm involved, where I'm looking actually for defects, I engage an engineer like Ben and a contractor like Paul to assist me into looking at the project and in doing an investigation to come up with a list of building and site issues to bring forward. So that's
one thing. Sorry to cut you off, Philip. I thought you were done.
Go ahead, Ben. No, it's fine.
One thing I want to go ahead and add, at least with respect to this slide, that I know we get a lot in the back and forth throws of a 558 project is, I mean, the middle photo you see on there. I mean, you have cracking stucco, right? Everybody in stucco is going to be cementitious based. Everyone has probably heard this at least a handful of times in their life of concrete cracks. So how are you going to stop it? You can't stop it. And also a lot of these issues are recurring issues. I mean, you have stucco cracks on a lot of different structures. You can see them on high rises, you see them on low rises, mid rises. Just because the fact that they exist does not make it acceptable, just because of its pervasivity within that building construction. There are several codes and standards that need to be followed in order to go ahead and mitigate those actual defects from presenting themselves or even being present. Whether it be through something like control joints or using the proper accessories. But for what we do, a lot of the time, the first easy one to throw back at the association or at the plaintiff is it's all maintenance. Typical maintenance, they didn't maintain it, or it happens on every other building. I hate seeing that one. I'm sure we all do, but it doesn't really doesn't move the needle. It doesn't provide any sort of progress in the claim one way or the other, but it's just a basic answer. But I do want to emphasize that the severity of these conditions, the pervasivity of these conditions are more indicative of a defect than they are just regular wear and tear. Some of your staining on your actual painting, if it's going to be sparse looking, I mean, while you may have some color fade from a deep and rich color, that's likely going to be more indicative of any trapped moisture you may have beneath there. And once we get into further slides, finding that causation and explaining that whole moisture path is really going to show and express the overall damages from the actual defect, but more importantly, the subsequent damage But these little visual indicators are really going to be crucial and key to whomever is going ahead and performing these both visual and then destructive analyses.
Let me add one other thing, Ben, and that is, um, when does an owner actually identify that it's not normal maintenance and instead it's a defect? And what we see is when I'm called with respect to perhaps a community association, a condo or a townhome, they'll call me and say, we keep on getting cracks in our stucco. We go in, we fix the joints, we caulk them, we repaint them, and 2-3 years later we get them again. And I'm focusing on a stucco, but you can say a roof, you can say window leaks, you can say whatever you want, but it's the repeated nature of something, of maintenance. You keep on coming up and having to do something again and again. Instead of a 5 or 8 year painting cycle, you've got to paint them in 3 to 4 or 5 years. So a shorter cycle. That is showing something that is beyond normal maintenance, because the paint should last longer than that. If it's not, and they're staining on it and continue showing cracks, then there's something indicative of something beyond normal maintenance. And now you're in the stage where you're looking at, this is a construction defect. So again, it's not, most owners don't recognize that they have something wrong, but the surefire way of knowing that something wrong is if you have a maintenance item that repeats itself again and again and again, despite doing ordinary maintenance, it comes back. So that's an indication that there's a construction defect. And at that point, you should have a heightened sense of concern and get a contractor or an engineer involved to take a look at the issue, because it's going to point towards a construction defect.
Correct. We get some common ones that are like consistent pump failures, for example. So like swapping out some like 20 or 30 horsepower pumps, which are pretty massive pumps, which shouldn't have to go ahead and be swapped out on a 1 or 2 year cycle. Also an easy indicator for owners if you're starting to get like out of nowhere an increased electrical bill or water bill if you're going to be a large scale HOA. Some of those indicators are certainly something to note and to be mindful of, and to get the proper outside support to, at a minimum, evaluate to see what sort of issues you may be having or dealing with.
Excellent. So we're going to talk about what you might look for in a contractor that does construction defect work, that specializes in this niche, as well as the engineering company. So, Ben, why don't you give us your perspective of what you would look for in a contractor? Like, would that specialize this? Would they be doing destructive testing, cost analysis, that sort of thing? And then you can segue into engineering company that specializes in this.
Sure. So from a contractor standpoint of things, I mean, first and foremost, I want to be dealing with a contractor that focuses on restoration projects. Number one, I don't need a new construction contractor to go ahead and jump in. It's working with people in their homes is an entirely different animal than when it's just a raw shell. So without getting into the details, right? So understanding that you're having the right contractor there. Number two, making sure that if they're going to be providing any expert level services, that they've done it before at a minimum. That's something that we're going to care about, as well as attorneys like Philip. And understanding what staff and understanding our unified goals for what we intend to be working together for. So usually when engineer and contractors are going to be working together during a 558 case, it's really going to be focused around destructive testing. It's going to be, okay, here is our action plan of figuring out what's going on behind the stucco, behind the concrete, behind this wall. How's the performance of the sliding glass doors, the railings, the embedded post? Some component that is going to be hidden. So you're going to need to have a contractor to go ahead and execute a detailed plan. So a collaborative environment is critical. Understanding how to go ahead and rig the property is going to be critical. Understanding that there will be also a gallery of opposing experts as well, and some accommodation to that, those added parties needs to be taken. The notices and everything, they need to understand that at the end of the day, any sort of communication from the contractor will also be shared amongst a wide swath of individuals involved in that 558 case. So those are the key items that we critically care about, as well as getting into the nuts and bolts of if we're doing waterproofing, for example, or roofing, and we have to go ahead and cut some sections out and reapply new sections. Knowing that the contractor is an approved applicator of said products is going to be critical as well. I don't want to have a painter going ahead and putting on a door, for example, right? Using the most egregious scenario. But let's say we have a Tremco or a Sika or a Carlisle waterproofing. I want to make sure that the contractor being utilized, just even for the destructive testing, has experience with that product or those products, is also an approved applicator of those products. So there can also be transparency between the contractor and any technical representative from the manufacturer. And if any additional letters or information needs to be provided, there's a nice line of communication between those two parties specifically, on top of adding the engineer to the mix. Cost estimating is also going to be a very important role of the contractor, and knowing how to really be bidding this out or not bidding this out, to be estimating it, excuse me. At the end of it, the contractor needs to be made aware that no real outside forces are coming into play other than just objectively analyzing this project as a whole and estimating it. And what I mean by that is that in the traditional construction world, and Paul, you can go ahead and chime in whenever I may put my foot in my mouth, is that there's a lot of outside business factors that may impact the estimating process, may impact the estimating timing, may impact the estimating cost as far as labor and so on and so forth. So if a project is real versus not real, that could also have an impact of how these numbers really come to be, the secret sauce, if you will. So having a contractor that knows exactly what they're getting into, knowing that this is, at least in the initial, this is more of a budgetary process with a fair amount of still unknowns on the table. And there may be, given a lot of constraints in the evaluation process. Going into it objectively is going to be critical to maintain that objectivity when the opposing sides are evaluating that number. So it holds more water and is not immediately refuted as, oh, XYZ contractor was so busy and they're thinking that this is a real job and they're just throwing everybody at it. I'm getting an ambulance-based price here. This is entirely fictitious. Thank you, but no thank you, right? That's the last thing you want to go ahead and get when Philip is going to bat for these items, right? Philip doesn't want to go ahead and have that. We all can go ahead and do an easy sniff test and go ahead and see whether it's real or whether it's not. So just like we can internalize it, the opposing side and the insurance carriers and adjusters are going to be doing the same. They do that, again, day in, day out. So at least from the contractor end, that's what we really primarily focus on as to what we want to have. And Paul, do you want to add anything on to that?
Yeah, I think, if you're looking at a contractor that does cost estimating, where did they get their numbers? I mean, what historical data did they use? Are they using data from other projects? Have they done this type of work before? Do they have real world numbers from, say 50 different projects that they've done in the past and they've been awarded the job and produced it? I think that really holds up under cross-examination or any deposition. And then there's also the aspect of subcontractor, bids. Personally, I like to do it both ways. I like to do the historical data on projects that have been produced and a combination of subcontractors, and make sure the subcontractors have actually done this work or performed these services on, your prior jobs. So I think that's really important. And then the destructive testing, it is a collaborative effort, as Ben mentioned. We're there to support the engineers to do their job, and we need to make sure that we're working with them. And we rig the building safely, and we have the drops in place for the swing stage where they can access the areas that they need to access. And just kind of catering to their needs. How many people will they have out there? Do we have to? Is there shoring involved? Where are we putting the lifeline and tiebacks? Did we get Did we get engineering to find out if we could tie back to certain areas? Did we GPS or excuse me, ground
Yeah.
penetrating radar so that we don't, screw into a post tension cable or rebar? So there's a lot that go into it, and I think you're right, Ben. You're going to want somebody that's very, very experienced in this, that has done many of these investigations. And the engineers get really cranky too if you're not on top of your game, and so the attorneys, because it's costing money to do this. So that's my perspective. Philip, what do you have to say on this?
Sure. I mean, what you both mentioned are really important. I, as a litigator, looking at a contractor that I want to use, first of all, I mean, I need to make sure that they're credible. And so for the contractor, because the contractor is going to be a witness, they're going to be deposed, and they're also going to testify at trial if it gets to that stage of the case. But so they have to be experienced. They have to have the experience as a restoration contractor. They have to assist us in the process of initially going and doing the destructive testing, assisting the engineer to come up and do the openings and repair the openings to the owner's satisfaction. Critically important that they have that customer service aspect of it, because there's nothing worse than the owners and the boards contacting us and saying, what the heck happened? It looks like crap after the openings were made. So you need to make sure that you have a contractor on board that can not only work with the engineer to make the openings, but repair them so that the building doesn't look like it's been cut up. That assists us. Then you've got to have the contractor assist us in working with engineering to come up with repair bids, and repair bids that they can stand behind, because they're going to be scrutinized. They're going to be, when we start a construction defect case, we typically sue between 25 to 100 different parties. Imagine that. You have 25, so you have one law firm with your expert and with your engineer and with your contractor. Then you've got 25 to 100 other lawyers fighting you with their own experts that they brought on board. And so you're going against 25 to 100 other experts with your team that you've assembled going forward. So you need your expert to be able to stand behind what they've done on the project, to persuade the other side to, in fact, that if you say there's 100 things wrong, that there in fact there is 100 things wrong. If we say it's a $10 million repair, that's a $10 million repair, because I'm going to tell you that the 25 to other 100 experts are going to say, you say there are 100 things wrong, there's only 5. You say it's a $10 million project, we say it's 250,000. They're going to do it every time. So you need that contractor with the expertise and the ability to come up with real numbers that are that you can stand behind. Because if not, they're going to be torn apart when they're deposed and when they go to trial. So we look at somebody that not only is a great contractor, but they have to be able to testify, and they have to be able to testify credibly and persuasively, to convince the other experts that we're right and they're wrong, to convince a judge and a jury that we're right and the other 25 to 100 experts are wrong. So that's critically important. And then we want to make sure as we settle the case and hand off the case to the owner who is saying, here's your money, you need to fix this now, that you then segue with the engineer working with the contractor or other contractors to come in and be able to do the repairs that are needed there. And what's important there is that you want to make sure that on the repair side, that one, that they have a team assembled that can handle that, either with their own superintendents and subcontractors. And if I'm an owner, I always want to know, who's my project superintendent? Send me the resume of the project superintendent, because that's the person that is running the crews, whether it's the general contractor's own people, in-house staff that they have, or the subcontractors. Somebody's got to manage these people, and that's the project superintendent. And your project's going to go well if you've got a good superintendent, and it's not going to go well if the project superintendent is not there minding the mice that are doing the repairs. So you need to have a very strong project superintendent. And again, if it's my project, I want to know who are the subcontractors that are doing the work, and want to make sure that these are good subcontractors that are being used. The other simple things that we look at from a lawyer standpoint is, can the contractor get a performance bond, warranty bond on the work that's being performed? Very important on larger projects, and you need to make sure that they're bondable. The other thing we want to look at is insurance. The contractor has to have adequate insurance for the repairs that are being performed, because a contractor can come and say, look, I have $1 million CGL, commercial general liability policy. But that policy may look great because it says there's $1 million per occurrence. But there may be exclusions in that policy that take away the coverage that you otherwise thought you might have. So looking at the insurance coverage over and beyond just a certificate of insurance. So you get a certificate of insurance, this one-page document that says, here's the contractor, here's their insurance company, here's $1 million worth of coverage. Is that good enough? That is not good enough. You need to look at the policy. You need to have your either general counsel or outside counsel take a look at that policy, particularly on a large project, and make sure that there's adequate insurance. And you're not going to believe this, but there are contractors that have gone on and done work on condominiums that say they have $1 million policy, but it turns around they have a condominium exclusion in their policy. So they're not insured to work on condominiums. So that may seem laughable, but it actually happens all the time. I can't tell you how many developers have hired subcontractors where the subcontractors have exclusions where they can't even work on that type of project. But nonetheless, they did that. And then when it comes to my chasing after that subcontractor to get money, the insurance company is the first one to take a copy of their exclusion and say, we're not paying anything because my insured was not even authorized to work on this project. We're not insured to walk on this project. So likewise, on the repair side, you want to make sure that your repair contractor has adequate insurance for the work they're being performed. So that's what we look for in terms of a general contractor. There are many different things we look for. Not only can they assist us during the litigation process, can they assist the client with doing an invasive investigation? Can they assist the client with doing temporary repairs during the litigation process? And can they help us persuade a judge and jury and other expert witnesses that we're right and that we should win? And lastly, on the repair side, can they work with the owners and with the engineer to fix this property properly? And if there are any issues, will they come back and fix them? And if there is an issue, is there a bond that we can go after, and is insurance that we're going after? Those are the critical things that we look after.
And also
Yeah, thank
and
you.
there's a bit of a hybrid slide. I mean, because we can also hit the engineering aspect of things as well. And we dove a lot into the details. And I do want to take a quick step back just for everyone's benefit of understanding the generalized process, because I know we just jumped straight into the deep end. Hopefully we didn't lose too many people. So generally when you're going through this process, this 558 process, and you're going to hear it a lot of times, and it certainly is a process, so believe me when I say it, is really going to be stepped out. So the first part of it is going to involve the actual visual evaluation, right? So visual evaluation done by an engineer similar to me or our team to go ahead and get out on site and see what you have going on. And taking note and writing an associated report with respect to that in accordance to several industry standards. There'll also be a document review that's involved of all the actual plans that the association may have, any sort of backstory, if you will, or any sort of past medical history, if you want to keep with the doctor analogy. The report is written that basically says, here are all the patent items that we know of, and also here's some items that look to be a bigger issue, but would need to be further evaluated to determine why. The report that in that report is likely not going to have a lot of causation. This was caused by this rock that was thrown by that individual and it broke this window. That is not the intent of the report. The intent of the report is to place notice. Okay. Place notice is, I'm sure, a legal term. I'm not going to attempt to define it, but let's keep it for the practical aspect of things. Is placing the opposing parties, the original developer, contractor, subcontractors, on notice of issues. Issues meaning defects in the broadest of terms. A deviation can be an issue. the wall behind me on the plans could have been spec'd out to be red. Fortunately or fortunately, it was blue. That is still a defect. So there's a lot of different ways as far as innocent or egregious as far as what a defect can be. But the visual report will be done first. Then for the engineer to go ahead and determine cause and origin, why did these things happen? That's when the destructive testing takes place. And that's what we've been harping a lot on this part of it. And once we get through that process, there will be a back and forth with opposing experts. There will also be various legal meetings, whether they be mediations, depositions, arbitrations, trial, what have you, to find a resolution. And then ultimately remediation will occur. And it can also occur during the course of the 558 process as well, depending on the severity, depending on if it's a life safety component, an emergency sort of item that needs to be addressed, or just an issue that is impeding on the everyday operations of the property. Easy example of that is you're a hotel condominium, right? And your elevator sparsely works. That's kind of a problem when you get into high season and you want to go ahead and bring people to the beach and you're charging however much per room, and you can't get it done because you can't get people up there, and they're not gonna schlep all the way up to the 30-something floor carrying all their luggage. So those repairs certainly can and will be taking place during the course of the 5-day process, and it's doable. It's very doable as long as you provide notice. Notice going through your counsel like Philip, notice to your engineer like me, go ahead and set the scope of work. Philip will let the opposing side know what's going to happen, when's it going to happen, and if anybody wants to pony up and do it, awesome. But this still needs to be done for a variety of different reasons. By the way, see Ben's attached report that goes ahead and explains the issue and the scope of work. So it's just one added step in the process as opposed to after the process.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you both for your explanation on the contractor side. When I first came to Florida, there was very few construction contractors that were working in the defect niche that actually specialized this. And it seems like every week on LinkedIn, I see a new vendor that was, just as an example, a painter before, and now they're offering construction defect services. So thank you for your clarification. And Philip, I'd like to switch gears on you, and I'd like for you to talk about what do you look for in an engineer when it comes to identifying these building deficiencies and working with you through the claim?
So a lot of what we just discussed about a contractor, a lot of the same things hold true with respect to a consultant like Ben. We want to make sure that they're specialized with respect to construction defects, doing restoration work and identifying the issues with a wrong build, with a building like that. It really, that specialization is really important. And that's why there are not a lot in the marketplace. And when we go out, we have basically like a team of different experts that we can consult depending upon the location and the type of product. But that specialized area is critically important. And again, somebody like Ben that has that years of experience with a deep bench is critically important. So the other thing is the experience with respect to the project that we're handling, because a consultant, an engineer, or an architect that is experienced in doing two-story townhomes may not be appropriate, and usually is not appropriate for a 30-story high-rise. And so we want to make sure that the consultant we're using has lots of experience dealing with the type of structure, the project that is involved there. The other thing that is important to us is the bench. Hiring a solo engineer or architect is great, dealing with one person, but the problem you have is that they get busy. And since the Surfside litigation, many, if not most engineers are so slammed with certifications and everything that's going on that they are overwhelmed and they're unable to turn around products and in a timely manner, which delays the litigation. And no client wants their claim process delayed. They want their money now. They want it as soon as possible. And if I can't move the litigation forward because the consultant is overwhelmed, that's problematic. So I look at an engineer and architect and say, how deep is their bench? How many people do they have behind them that can assist this process? I may have one person that I want to actually testify, but they have a bunch of people working with them that can do all the other legwork so that this testifying expert is available there. So having somebody with a deep bench is critically important. The other aspect we look at is, do they do it in-house? As Ben mentioned, the great thing about Epic is that they have a bunch of disciplines underneath the Epic umbrella that can do this. What I call it is one-stop shopping. I can go to Epic, and if I have a mechanical issue, I know they can deal with it. If they have a structural issue, they have a civil side issue, they've got it. HVAC, MEP issue, whatever the case may be, they've got it under their umbrella. That is a lot easier for a law firm, a lawyer to go forward knowing that they've got one engineer, architect that has sub-disciplines underneath them that can handle the work. The other thing that's important, just as I talked about with the contractor, is persuasiveness. They have to be persuasive. They have to have the ability to convince the other side. When I say the other side, the adverse parties that you're suing and their expert witnesses and a judge and a jury, that they're right and that we should win based upon what they say. Because if they're not, they could be a fantastic engineer, a fantastic architect, and you put them behind a closed door, they can come up with these amazing plans and repairs, but they can't talk. They can't convince the other side that we're right and they're right. They're not going to be helpful as a consultant, and they may be helpful as what we call a pocket consultant, somebody that we don't use for the actual as a face for the litigation. We put them in our back pocket and they provide advice and things, but we're not going to use them as a testifying expert. So, but there's a place for somebody that may not be persuasive, but if not only are they a good technician, but they're also persuasive, that is the expert that I want to retain. The other thing that's important, as I mentioned before, is availability. Engineers and architects are really busy. There's a lot of construction and a lot of repairs that are being done in Florida. It's the land of milk and honey for contractors and engineers, and so they're all busy. If I go to a client and I tell a client, I'm going to resolve your case within 2 years, and I may have some outliers that I have to chase after for 3 years, but I'm done in 3 years. I'm going to be a liar to my client if the engineer and architect cannot get me a report. I have one case on a high-rise down in Miami where it took me a year to get a report from a totally wonderful and great engineering firm, but they were so slammed that they were juggling 100 other projects. And so it was always, I'll get to it next month. I'll get to it next month. It took a year to get the report. That's unacceptable from our standards, where we want to litigate the case within 2 years and try to get it resolved or tried within 2 years. So up front, we go and we want to know what's your availability. When can you do destructive testing? When can you get me a report? Those are critical things that I need to know in choosing an engineer. The other thing, again, is cost. Some engineers are super expensive. Some of them are super cheap. Some of them are in between, just like lawyers and just like contractors, for anything for that matter. But you have to look at cost. I mean, if you've got an engineer that's charging $1,000 an hour on a small construction defect case, that may not make sense. And you may need to use somebody different than your go-to engineering firm on that. And likewise, the engineer may say, you know what, I'm slammed with other work and it doesn't make sense for my firm to work on that. Likewise, I may have a client that comes to me and says, I've got this small defect issue, can you handle it? And my response is, I'd love to help you, but I'm not geared toward, you know, like a plumbing defect in a single family residence. That's not how my firm is geared to doing it. So respectfully, I can't handle a case, but here is somebody that can, and refer them out to other lawyers that can do that. So cost is an issue that you have to look at also in terms of doing that. And then all the other things that we mentioned with respect to contractors, you take a look at, you know, the insurance that they have available for the project, who they're going to put as their lead to handle them, the testifying expert. These are all factors that we look at. And again, one thing I didn't mention is geographic area, okay? Some engineers may be perfectly fine to work in the Panhandle, but they would be totally inappropriate to use them in the Miami market. And matter of fact, that's in many circumstances, that is the case. And it may be that they don't have the expertise in terms of work. Say a Panhandle engineer does not have the expertise that to translate to the Miami high-rise market. But it's also, more importantly, what about a jury? If you have a jury of local people from the Panhandle market, and you've got a Miami-based engineer testifying, they may not look favorably upon that, as opposed to somebody who is from the Panhandle, practices from the Panhandle, has an office in the Panhandle. So we also look at geographic limitations or availability of the engineer before making that decision. It's a very, very, very important decision, because I'll tell you what, proving a construction defect is really easy. I hire an engineer like Ben. Ben comes in and says, here, I've got a product, construction, or design deficiency that violates the code or deviates from industry standards. And here's a before and after photo, and here's the code provision or industry standard. There's the defect. There, voila, you win. But however, I need that engineer and architect to persuade the others that in fact it's a defect and that we're right. And I can do all the litigation. My litigation is really pushing the case to a trier of fact or a settlement, a mediator to settle the case that looks at what the engineer has put together and says, they're right. You do have liability here, and either you should settle, that's a mediator talking to the other party, or in front of a jury, the jury's saying, that engineer for the plaintiff, for the association, or for the apartment building owner is right, and I'm going to decide in their favor that they should prevail in this circumstance. So those are all factors that we look at in picking an engineer or an architect. And it's very, very, very important decision. One of the most important decisions that we make during the litigation process is the engineer or architect that we choose.
I saw a question pop up in the chat. I'll just go ahead and jump on it. And I'll also say it's from Irish Kevin, because that's also fun to go ahead and say. Asking the question about being a quote unquote specialist. Now, are there any sort of requirements or qualifications, added qualifications? The general answer is no. It's really going to boil down to knowledge, experience, skills, education, and training, all within the same the item that's being testified to. Easy example is the movie My Cousin Vinny. At the end of it, I mean, the expert, the person with the most knowledge, ended up being was it Marissa Tomei? But anyways, the woman that was actually grew up in an auto body shop that was able to go ahead and explain the entire aspect of why everything happened. So you can have general contractors that act as expert witnesses. You can have engineers act as expert witnesses, architects, arborists, the wide swath. You can have doctors, depending on the issue. So, but I think a very important thing to go ahead and understand is, where are they doing their work? Is it on similar base structures or components? What does their testimony history look like? Have they been to the ultimate venue, be it arbitration or trial? How does it look? And at the end of it, the expert needs to be able to tell the same story, the same conclusions to a wide audience, right? It needs to be technical enough to go ahead and hit the opposing technical individuals. It needs to also be able to explain it broadly enough to get the general public, get the eventual peers, the 12 individuals that may be sitting on the jury. It also needs to be written in a manner and effective in a manner to go ahead and trigger insurance coverage, some key terms, right? I mean, that's going to be crucial for individuals like Philip to go ahead and push the subsequent damages that may be a covered component as part of that insurance that Philip spoke about, versus just correcting the defect. What I mean by a subsequent damage is, okay, the window was installed improperly, whatever that may be. That is the defect. Now, what is that damage because of that? You have water pouring into the unit day in, day out, whenever it rains. That's the subsequent damage. That part may be covered. The actual window installation itself, probably not covered. So if you have a report that only talks about the window was installed bad this way, this way, no mention of the actual damages, Philip may go ahead and say, thanks for this report. Looks great, a lot of great content, but I can't do anything with it. So you have to understand the audience every step of the way to be successful in this 558 process as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I got a question for the panelists. When destructive testing involves the unit usage, and I think what that means is when we go inside a unit owner's unit, what notice is required or expected to be given to the owner? Can the owner refuse entry for the process? And I know, Philip, you have repair coordinators that deal with this. Would you like to answer that question for us?
Yes, we can. Well, you want to have volunteers. You don't want to force anything on any of the owners. I mean, the association may have, if you're talking about a community association, you may have in your governing documents, your declaration or your bylaws, the authority of the association to come into a unit or a townhome to take a look at the issue with proper notice given to the owner. But we try to avoid angering the owners that make up the association that we represent. In most circumstances, we ask for volunteers to assist us, and we send out surveys to the owners that they can send us. We do not want to force an owner to allow us to have an inspector come into their unit. And usually we're able through the engineer, the contractor, the board, the community manager, property manager, to find people that would allow us to enter their units to look at them, if that's necessary in the first place. It may be if we're looking at stucco installation that there's no need to get inside somebody's unit, but we may want to look at the outside of their unit. Again, it's the same issue. What if the homeowner says, I don't want anybody touching the exterior of my building? Now, the declaration may say that the association is responsible for maintaining and repairing the exteriors of the buildings, and so the owner can't stop them. But again, why are you going to anger an owner by forcing this on them? So typically we're able to go to other units, other properties to do the inspection, either on the outside, which is in most circumstances it's exterior only, and sometimes on the interior by asking for volunteers. My law firm would never recommend forcing this on one of the owners, because what happens is the owner is just upset, and next thing you know, you've got litigation involved with the association and the owner, because the association wants to get an expert in there. It's generally not that important to have one specific unit looked at where this has to happen. So we ask for volunteers, and it usually works out under those circumstances. But again, depending upon the governing documents, the association can force it. It's just, it shouldn't be done. We try to avoid that.
Yeah, usually when you're doing destructive testing as well, it's going to be based off a representative sample. Usually, given the fact that, let's just use a high rise as an example, it's going to be very big, a lot of units, and there's no need to get into 500 units for the same exact thing if there's a better way to go ahead and skin the cat. Yep. Statistical samples can be done. An objective analysis can be established to utilize those results of, let's arbitrarily call it 20% of the building, to obtain that data and extrapolate forward. And usually if there is a need to gain access into every single unit, it'll likely not be for the purposes of performing a destructive test. It'll likely just be confirming the presence of what is believed to exist in other places. That'll probably be more visual based, or just a quick operational, as opposed to cutting open a hole in a wall or removing tile or anything that is remotely destructive. And also following any sort of destructive test, I saw another question from Irish Kevin again. All right, so how deep can a destructive test get without further damaging the structure? So when you're doing your destructive testing, it is going to be at very localized locations, right? It's not going to be, okay, let's remove all the concrete from this one balcony right now and let's look at the whole thing. No, that is not the way to go ahead and do it. It's going to be very localized. If it's going to be on the balcony, am I looking at the reinforcing? Am I looking at the railing post? Am I looking at the post tension strands? Am I looking at the stucco? Those components are just going to be removed to observe the hidden items that, quite frankly, the engineer, the expert can't answer without doing that test. And once the engineer expert goes ahead and obtains that in-field data, that localized location and all the localized locations for the testing procedure will be repaired to a standard that at least matches what was there prior to that test. More times than not, it is going to be better than what was there. At a minimum, just using the repair materials that are going to be specified by the engineer or the expert overseeing that work with the contractor. So it is not going to be further damaging the structure in any way, shape, or form. It's only going to be pinpointed to address whatever is going to be evaluated.
Thank you, Ben. I know Philip talked about the geographical area and the specialization of some contractors and engineers. And just because we have people from all over the state of Florida on this webinar with us today, I don't think a lot of people really appreciate how different the construction really is from, say, a Miami high-rise to a two-story townhome. You know, you got reinforced concrete and cantilevered balconies with post-tension cables. And, you know, in, say, Central Florida, you have a block first story with, you know, wood frame with stucco over it. And those are completely different experts, usually completely different engineers. I think all three of us on this call actually do both, but you know, there is a big difference. And depending on where you're at and what type of project you have, you're going to need the services of probably you can't just use the same expert. So thank you for all of that, you guys. Let's move on to
The third slide.
the third slide.
We're
Yeah.
making it really
We're
deep
making
into
our
this whole
way through
presentation,
this.
guys. Good
Well,
job.
we're gonna move a little bit more quickly. Well, a lot of this is some of it is redundant coming on, so we'll start to
Yeah.
move more quickly.
Yeah, so this is what should I look for in a journey, and I have my perspective on this, but Philip, I want to give you opportunity to talk about, you know, in terms of your business model and you specialize just in construction defect. I know you have a special branch of the insurance in-house. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your model and what you think sets you apart from perhaps another attorney?
Sure. What I'm going to raise is, I think, same things that I think you should be looking for a lawyer. I think applies to Balchanic. Obviously, I'm going to say that, but let me tell you, it's more in general. What should a owner of a property that potentially has construction defects look for in an attorney? And it's kind of similar to what we just talked about with an engineer and contractor with some nuances. The first thing is you want to make sure that the attorney you're looking to hire has a specialized area of expertise in handling construction defect cases. And it sounds like it's obvious, but it's not. And the example I give is that if you're going to need heart surgery, would you hire a heart surgeon or a dermatologist? Obviously, you're going to retain a heart surgeon to do that type of surgery. Likewise, you want to make sure that you hire a lawyer that has specialized expertise in construction defect, because it's a highly nuanced area of law. And there are a lot of lawyers that kind of dabble in this, that say, like, they may do personal injury and they say, well, I'm a smart lawyer. I can do construction defect. I can read the books and handle this. Run away from that. You don't want to do that, because they don't have the nuanced area. They don't have the experience in dealing with it. They don't have the insurance expertise. They don't have the level of working with the opposing lawyers and insurance adjusters that a lawyer that specializes in construction defect works with these same people again and again and again and again. They've seen it. So want to make sure that the lawyer is really specialized in this practice of law, because There are a lot of lawyers out there that dabble in it, but it's not really their specialty. The other thing that you'll want to look for is experience. Experience matters. A lawyer doing construction defect cases for 2 years, everything else being equally, is not going to be as good as a lawyer that's done it for 20 years, who's seen everything that there is to see out there, who's gone through many battles, litigation, trials, mediations, motion practice. So the experience is very important. And again, using my heart surgery example, are you going to hire a heart surgeon that's just, finished their residency and is going to do a heart surgery, or are you going to retain a heart surgeon that's done it for 20 years and done 1,000 heart surgeries? I'm going to go to the experienced heart surgeon under those circumstances. The other thing that I mentioned before with the engineer and the contractor is the bench. As I mentioned before, and you're typically in these construction defect cases going to sue minimum of 25 different parties, depending upon what Ben and Paul come up with who caused the defects. And then you're going to sue those contractors, the developer, the engineers, the architects, the subcontractors that are responsible for those defects. So when you're suing 25 to 100 parties, and 100 is real. I mean, we had a case in Jacksonville where against a national home builder involving 600 condominium units, where we had over 100 parties that we sued based upon the deficiencies on this product. Each one of them had their own lawyer. Each one of them had their own expert. And you can see how a law firm can be overwhelmed unless they have a deep bench. So you want to know how many lawyers and paralegals that they have standing behind the lawyer that you're hiring. So if you're hiring Philip Joseph with 35 years of experience, specializing in this area, who used to represent developers when he was a young lawyer, and now just after 5 years of doing that, representing just owners of properties and suing developers and contractors and insurance companies, you got to know who's behind them, who's actually going to do a lot of this legwork, because I can't do it all. If I've got 50 depositions that have to happen over a 2-week process, there's no way that I could handle that by myself. So I have to have a strong team of lawyers and paralegals and clerks that assist us in bringing those claims. So you need to know what their bench consists of, because there are a lot of boutique firms out there that are 3 to 5 lawyers. I don't know how they can handle these cases and get the cases resolved in a short amount of time for the maximum amount of money. And that's what's going to happen. When your lawyer is overwhelmed, what happens is, instead of a case resolving within 2 or 3 years, it's now 4 to 5 years, 5 to 6 years. I took over a case in Miami from another law firm in the Miami market that had been ongoing for 7 years. In that 7 years, they had an offer for $250,000. We took it over. We sued a bunch of other parties that they didn't sue. We settled with some parties that we didn't think needed to be there. We settled that case in 11 months for $10 million against the parties there. So, and the reason we were able to do that is the bench that we brought in, the ability to go full bore after all these parties that were involved. And the other firm was just frankly overwhelmed. So it's very important. How deep is the bench of the law firm that you're handling, and specifically in construction defects? Because you could hire a firm that has 100 lawyers, and I'm going, they got 100 lawyers. I'm hiring Pete from this law firm that has 100 lawyers. But of those 100 lawyers, how many of them are really specialized construction defect lawyers and paralegals? You may have 3 or 4 at best. And so that's what you have to look at. The other thing you need to look at is critically important is insurance expertise. From doing this for 35 years, first representing developers, when I represented developers, the first thing I did was I tendered claims to an insurance company to pick up defense of the litigation. My developer clients did not want to pay the claims. Although they had many millions stacked away that they could, they didn't want it. They had insurance and they wanted the insurance to pay for it. So insurance is critical on the defense side, because every single party, even the D.R. Hortons of the world, they all want their insurance companies or their subcontractors' insurance companies to pay for these claims. Likewise, from a plaintiff in this, representing clients with construction defects, I've got to make sure that there's money to pay for the claims. The easiest part of my job is to prove construction defects. I hire Ben, I hire Paul, they give me a list of defects in a 1,000-page plus report that tells me what's wrong. And guess what? And then I'm going to convince the other side they're construction defects. It's hard to deny where if they're supposed to install 3-coat stucco 3/4 of an inch and they installed 2-coat stucco a 1/2 inch, that's a construction defect. It is a construction defect, and it's easy to prove. The hard part is getting money. That is the hardest part. And when we go in a construction defect case, the whole litigation, aside from when we initially come up with a list of defects, is convincing insurance companies to pay. Because the insurance companies, despite all the commercials you see on TV, the good hands people, how they're there and you got Flo there to pay these claims, that's not what's going to happen. The insurance companies, when you bring a claim against them, are going to say, number one, that's not, my client didn't do it. We come back and say, here's proof that your client, your insured did that. Number two, well, no, number two, they didn't do anything wrong. Again, we go to Ben and say, you're wrong. Here's where our expert says that your insured did it wrong. Then they come back and they say, well, it is not, we don't have coverage for that. And you have to come back and say why it was covered for them. Then they're going to come back again and say, well, we have an exclusion. Here we have an exclusion. And if you look at an insurance policy, you'll see an insurance policy is over 100 pages long. And say it's 120 pages. The first 100 pages, you don't even have to read. What they basically say is we're going to insure some type of casualty, some type of peril, some type of loss. That's all it says in the first 100 pages. It's the final 15 to 20 pages is where you have the exclusions that you must read. That is where they giveth in the first 100 pages and they taketh away from you in the last 15 to 20 pages. And you have to take a look at those because insurance companies will come back and say, we have this exclusion, we will not pay it. And they come up with so many. They have a townhome exclusion, a condo exclusion. They have a moisture limitation that says, even though we have $1 million policy, we only cover up to $50,000 for moisture-related damages. So you have to look at those exclusions and get around them because they're going to use that as a defense. Then finally, the final defense of an insurance company is, we're just not going to pay you. And then you go, what? We've proven everything that all these hurdles you've put in front of us, we've jumped in front of those. We've gone over them. And they say, we're still not going to pay you. We're going to want to take it to trial. So you absolutely have to have insurance expertise because that is what pays for 95% of the claims that owners bring on these cases. So that the point is insurance expertise is critically important. And I'll give an example of a case again. My practice isn't solely related to Miami, but in Miami, where we were handling a condominium case that another law firm was handling, and again another circumstance where it didn't settle for many, many years. And the reason they did that is they brought both a construction defect case and a product defect case, and by doing that, they were weakening their construction defect case because the construction defect defendants were saying it's a product issue. And the product suppliers were saying it was a construction installation issue. So they're both putting their fingers against each other. And at the same point, nobody had done anything to trigger insurance coverage. The developer was sitting on the sideline who said, I have no money. I have an insurance policy, but I have no money to pay for anything. So what we did is we looked at that and said, well, hold on. You have an additional insured endorsement from the general contractor. Did you tender to the general contractor? Yeah, we did 5 years ago and nothing ever happened. So we went to the developer and said, tell you what, you give us $100,000 and you sign a $13 million consent judgment that basically says you consent the judgment against your entity for $13 million. We will not enforce it against your client. And those documents are, that consent judgment is called a Koblenz agreement here in Florida. But it's nothing more than a consent judgment where somebody says, you sued me and I consent to a judgment against me. So we get this $13 million consent judgment from the developer after 5 years of another law firm litigating this. We then turn to the general contractor and say, general contractor, you wrongfully denied an additional insured tender to you. As a result, we have gotten a $13 million judgment from the party that you should have insured, the developer. So now we not only own our direct claims for the condominium association for construction defects, we also own the developer's claims against you, general contractor, for wrongfully denying an additional insured tender. And as a result of that, we get to recover the developer's defense costs, their expert costs that they did, and any amount that they paid to satisfy our claim, which, by the way, is $13 million. So you have 30 days to pay us $13 million, or we're going to file this judgment and start collecting against you. That party settled with us for that dollar amount within the 30-day time period after 5 years of litigation. And the other law firm was a great law firm. The problem is they didn't have insurance expertise. They didn't look at the insurance side. We have in-house insurance coverage lawyers. That's all they do. They work side by side with the litigators to look at the policies and to make sure that we get over every single hurdle that the insurance company is going to put up to not paying, where the insurance company absolutely has to pay to go forward. So I can't stress how important insurance coverage is, and having in-house insurance coverage experts that can look at the policies going over. Because when you sue 25 different parties, you need to get the insurance policies for every single one of those parties. And not only just one policy. Say that they have been in business for 10 years. You're going to want to get 10 years of policies for each party. So for example, if you waited until the end of 10 years and you've got 25 parties you're suing, they're up to 250 different insurance policies that you're going to look at, and look at the exclusions specifically to see how you can get around those so that you can make the insurance companies pay. So I can't stress enough how important insurance is. The other one you want to take a look at is strategy. Not all lawyers handle cases the same. We all handle them differently. And I'll give you an example or examples. Some lawyers take what we call the rifle approach. When they have a construction defect case, Ben and Paul have come up with a list of defects, and they go, aha, okay, I'm going to go after the developer and the general contractor. And that's all they sue. They take a rifle approach, one bullet to shoot those two. There are benefits of doing that in the sense that the litigation is a lot cleaner, easier, because you're just suing two parties, but there's a huge detriment. And the major detriment is this. You're not bringing in the subcontractor, the design professionals that may have contributed to that, and whom the developer and the general contractor want to get money. So what happens when you have a rifle approach and suing the general contractor and the developer only is that the developer and the general contractor turn around and sue the subcontractors and design professionals. So they do what we call a third-party complaint to bring them in. Well, now as a plaintiff's lawyer bringing these claims, I go and I stomp up and down and pound my fists in front of the developer and the general contractor and say, pay me my $10 million. And they say, no, we're going to get it from the subcontractors. And guess what? I, as a plaintiff lawyer, don't control the litigation anymore, because I can't force the subcontractors to pay the money. I can squeeze the general contractor, the developer, but the real money is coming from the subcontractor. So now I've lost control of the litigation. So as you can tell from the way I've described this, I'm not a proponent of the rifle approach. Another one approach is the shotgun approach. And that is where you'll look at the list of defects and you say, well, you know, the landscaper could have had something to do with the failing stucco, so I'm suing the landscaper. I'm going to sue the guy that installed the kitchen cabinets because, you know, whatever reason, they sue anybody and everybody. The great thing is, I mean, sure, they've brought in a lot of potential insurance pockets to dip their hands into to grab money. The problem is this: a lot of those parties really did not cause the damages that you're seeking to sue on. And as a result of that, you're weakening your case. Because when you go there and you've sued 100 different parties and you go in front of a jury and the jury sits there and says, half these people aren't responsible for anything. Why are we, in fact, bringing these claims? So from my standpoint, for doing this for 35 years, that severely weakens your claims. You don't want to come up and make a mountain out of a molehill, and you don't want to bring in petty and small claims. It weakens the real claims. So a shotgun approach, as you can tell from my statements, I think is an incorrect way of handling them. What we think my firm does is bring a targeted shotgun approach. We only bring claims against parties that we think are responsible for the defects for which the owner is bringing claims. So if you have exterior envelope issues, a stucco wall or fiber cement wall, and you want to bring in all parties involved that could have contributed to the deficiencies involved with that building envelope. And the lawyer is going to talk to, I will talk to Ben and I'll talk to Paul to make sure that I've identified all the potential culprits for that, for doing that. And those are the parties that I'm going to go after. So the reason you do that, in my view, is that the litigation with a targeted shotgun approach, I control the litigation, because guess what? I'm going to sue the developer, because the developer is always 100% responsible for the product they put together. I'm going to sue the general contractor, because the general contractor is 100% responsible, as a non-delegable duty to build that project according to code and to industry standards. It doesn't matter that they hired subs and they want to blame the subs. That's great. Get some money from the subs, but you're responsible for this. You pulled the permit. You're the general contractor. You're on the hook. I also sue the subcontractors. Why? Because they also contributed to the wrong, and they all have $1 million policies that I'm chasing, and the design professionals to the extent they're responsible. So by doing that, I control the litigation. Now, if I want to sue with a gutter installer, I can sue with the gutter installer and take their money, as opposed to having to rely upon the general contractor and the developer, who may never get money from the gutter installer, but I control the litigation. Likewise, my claims are strong. And I know they're strong because when I go in front of a jury, I've got Ben and Paul to testify about how the work was deficient and how it was deficient and the resultant damage caused by that deficient work. So the strategy that the lawyer brings is entirely important. It is one of the most critical things that an owner should be asking. What is your strategy for handling this case? Well, I'm going to sue the responsible parties and I'll get it done. Well, how long? And what's your strategy to get it done? You need to know these things going forward. And an experienced litigator has no problem explaining their strategy. And frankly, I believe my strategy is better than other competing lawyers' strategy. And again, I've taken over many cases from other law firms that have different strategies. And again, if you look at our reference list and call them, you'll see, they'll tell you the difference between our strategy and other lawyer strategy. It works, and it's worked for 35 years that I've been doing it. The other last thing I'll mention is fees. Okay, different lawyers charge different fees. Some owners, community associations, they can't afford a fee structure that a perfectly wonderful lawyer that could do a wonderful job for you is going to charge them. For example, you may have a lawyer that says, who has all the credentials. They're specialized, experienced, have a deep bench of insurance coverage. They have a great strategy, but they're going to charge you $1,000 an hour, and they give you a budget that says they're going to charge you $300,000 the first year, and if it goes to trial, they're going to have a litigation budget of $1.5 million that they're going to want you to pay in the next 2 years. And the association looks at that and says, we can't afford this. We don't have the reserves. We're not going to specially assess our owners, because what's going to happen is they're going to remove us as board members. Number one, there's going to be a coup. And number two, they're going to say, no mas, we're not going to go any further. So settle the case. And guess what happens? A case that's worth $10 million, you settle for $1.5 million for peanuts. You settle it for pennies on the dollar because you couldn't afford to hire this lawyer on an hourly basis. And you basically threw in the towel. So knowing what the lawyer is going to charge you up front is critically important, and a client should ask that. When we first came into the market over 15 years ago, there were few few lawyers that were doing work on a contingency. And again, I'm licensed in many different states and have handled cases all across the United States. But when we came into the market at the invitation of some experts and general counsel lawyers that were representing community associations, they said, nobody offers this on a contingency. Will you do this on the contingency? And we said, of course we will, because we know that some clients couldn't afford to hire a construction defect lawyer doing it on a contingency basis. And so we offered that model going forward. And I would say the vast majority of our construction defect clients have hired us on a contingency basis, where on a contingency, let me explain the difference between the two. On a contingency, a lawyer isn't paid anything unless they recover money on behalf of their client. And if they don't recover money on behalf of their client, the owner owes them nothing. So the risk is really kind of transferred to the law firm going forward to get a result for the client. In addition to a contingency, for some law firms like ours, we advance all costs on behalf of our clients. The major cost of construction defect litigation is hiring somebody like Ben, somebody that can prove there's a construction defect and persuade others that we're right. That's the major expense of the litigation going forward. Rightfully so, because they're critically important. Our firm advances all those costs. Likewise, somebody like Paul that does the destructive testing to come up with a list of defects, that is another large cost in terms of construction defect litigation. We advance those costs. And what we do is we make those contingent too. So a Balganic contingency is where our fees are contingent and all litigation expenses, including the experts' fees and costs, are contingent. So if I don't recover money, guess what you owe as an owner? Nothing, nothing. Compare that with an hourly. On an hourly basis, you, the client, are going to get a bill every 30 days. A lawyer puts in 50 hours at $100 an hour, and 100 is way too low, obviously, but they're going to, and whatever costs they have in terms of their engineer, they're going to submit that bill for $25,000, $150,000, $200,000 every month, and it's payable. And the client has to pay it every month. And I'll tell you, the vast majority of owners either cannot afford to do that, or they don't like that business model and don't go for that. So knowing the fee structure is critically important going forward. And with respect to the fee structure, knowing how much they're going to charge the percentage and whether marking up costs, whether they're going to put interest on costs. We don't do that, but other firms do that. You need to know that going up front. So that is what you're looking for in a lawyer. And I've spent a lot of time on here because obviously being a lawyer, I'm passionate about it, but the lack of sophistication of some owners not really looking at these aspects is dumbfounding, to be honest with you. Why did they hire that lawyer? I look at a large project and I say, what are they doing? That is not the right lawyer to be handling that project. If not me, then maybe somebody else that has the sufficient expertise to do this. Well, but what are they doing, this lawyer? So look at your lawyers critically and analyze it under the 6 aspects that I just gave you. That's all.
Well, thank you, Philip. We are going to go to our 4th slide. So there's been a big change, and the people paying attention and the people that work in our space, they all know about the statute of ultimate repose. July 1st, I believe, it moves from 10 years to 7 years. And in my opinion, this is bad for consumer rights. I know we find a lot of construction defect or building deficiencies in year 8, 9, and sometimes 10 hours before the 10 years is up. We've had instances of that. So, Ben, in your opinion, what do you think about this change in the defect? And maybe you could provide us, or the statute, maybe you could provide us an example of something that you've been involved with.
Sure, absolutely. So this change, like many other updates and changes throughout the lifespan of the 558 statute, is ultimately only further benefited developers and contractors, right? I mean, the heavier lobbyists, and it's been true. And Florida, I mean, the great state of Florida that it is, has always been very favorable to developers, general contractors, development as a whole, right? So nothing has changed from that script. It is now making it just harder for an association to go ahead and make it through this process from the years, as well as also just the level of detail that's required from experts like us to go ahead and define exactly where this is coming from. Is it coming from this pinhole leak or that pinhole leak? The burden of proof has certainly elevated over the lifespan of it as well. But also one thing to keep in consideration is that some of these items, some of these defects that we've been talking about here today, take time to present themselves. They aren't just, okay, this is something that was a broken window installed from day one, right? This could be a hidden post-tension pocket that is allowing moisture to get into the encapsulation cap that wasn't properly seated, and it's just slowly corroding within. And finally, year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8, you see this leaching out effect occurring, or potentially you're starting to have some of those post-tension strand failures actually shooting through. It's not an uncommon scenario. And Philip can go ahead and make mention to it, which I'm sure he will, is that whenever an association is ultimately at that settlement table and signing any sort of document, and that won't be at an actual table, but the proverbial table, is signing that document and getting whatever sort of reparations, there will absolutely be language in there that says, all right, you cannot come back at us for literally anything. And when I say anything, I'm really talking about patent versus latent defects, things you can see and things that you cannot see. So it's limiting that available time frame. If you think about even from that 7-year time frame is, all right, so like some of these questions, when does the clock start ticking? If it's 7 years after turnover, I mean, you maybe just be getting into that first paint cycle. And in that first paint cycle, you'll likely have some level of, let's say, stucco that needs to go, or exterior work that's going to need to be addressed as a change order. But once you do that repair work, you may find that, wow, this was caused from, or this has been festering from day one. This is caused from original construction. And unfortunately, a lot of associations with this update may not have any other recourse, any other avenue to go ahead and seek those reparations, which is not to the remote benefit of the end user, of all the homeowners, of Florida being one of the fastest growing population states in the nation. And it certainly will be that way for an extended period of time. So it's certainly a shame. And one last point I do want to go ahead and hit with respect to this is that from our standpoint of things, from the engineer and the expert standpoint of things, when a claim is brought up, when I start doing my work, when the report first gets out, doing this 1 year or within 1 year of turnover versus 6.5 years, if I had another finger, 6.5 years after turnover, those are two entirely different angles as far as the explanation, the causation and explanation of damages are concerned, right? The opposing argument of failure to maintain starts to become a little bit louder and a little bit louder year after year after year. So the reporting and the analysis from the engineer to combat that needs to be on point the older or the later in the game that the evaluations are done, knowing that that can be a more compelling argument at that point in time versus, okay, well, you buy a used car right off the lot, you expect to have 4 inflated tires and a steering wheel and everything works in the car, and you show up the first day, you get it, you already paid, you did the financing, whatever, you show up, you're super excited, and all the tires are deflated or they're all bald, and you're like, what's going on here? Like, this is ridiculous. So, but there's no way was that your maintenance as the secondary buyer. It was falling upon it was from the original owner in the scenario of that component. So it's a much easier argument saying, well, no, you're taking maintenance out of the equation here. This is solely caused by your doings prior to us even existing. Whereas that argument cannot be used 6.5 years later.
So Paul, let me
Any
jump
thoughts
in
on
here.
this?
Yeah, let me jump in on this really quickly. And I know we've gone a long time and a lot of people want to stop in the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to shorten this explanation here. The first thing I want to point out that there are two type of deadlines that we're talking about here. One is the statute of limitations, and that is under Florida law, the timeline when you reasonably discover that there's something wrong. What's the deadline? And in Florida, it's 4 years. So 4 years when you knew or should have known that there was a problem. That's called the statute of limitations. On top of that, there's what we call the statute of repose, which says, regardless of when you discovered it, you have a firm deadline where after that deadline, it doesn't matter. Your claims are barred. So it's called the statute of repose. And so currently in Florida, the statute of limitations is 4 years, and it's still the same. Up until July 1 of 2024, it is still 10 years, and it's 10 years from the latter of certain events. 10 years from this when the COO was issued a certificate of occupancy, or the most common one is when all the sales have occurred for the unit, when actual possession by the owner. So the 10 years starts when the owners actually are present and occupying the structure going forward. So that was the law. And I'll tell you, it used to be 15 years, but 15 years ago, the builders and developers, insurance companies came in and said, 15 years is way too long. 10 years is a fair number. And they went in front of the Senate and the legislature in Florida and told them 10 years is a fair number. Well, that's what we want. Well, what did they do? They waited until everybody forgot. And despite massive lobbying efforts to prevent this from happening, last year, this was crammed down the throats of all the legislature by the governor and the developers and insurance companies to reduce it down to 7 years. Even though 15 years earlier, they had said 10 years was fine. And even though developers and contractors have made record profits in the last 10 years in Florida, they still said, gosh, you know what? 15 years was way too long. 10 years, now we take it back. 7 years is what it is. And I'll tell you, in the next 10 years or so, they're going to try to reduce it to 5 or 4 years. But here's what's terrible about this new law on the statute of repose. Not only have they reduced it from 10 years to 7 years, retroactively, so you lose 3 years right off the bat. On top of that, they start the clock earlier, because remember I told you the current law is 10 years from the latter of certain events, and usually the latest event is when the owners occupy the premises. Now it's the earlier of certain events, and guess what the certain events are? It's the earlier of a temporary certificate of occupancy, or the certificate of occupancy, or a certificate of completion. This is maddening. It is terrible. Why is that? Because years before somebody actually the turnover occurs, or people buy their units or their homes, or they get the structure, a TCO, a temporary certificate of occupancy, can be issued. And what happens then is this: a developer or contractor can delay the actual turnover or sale of the buildings or the project or units, and then it's then turned over, and then somebody has a year or two left of the 7 years to bring a claim. As Ben told you, it doesn't happen because most boards or owners are oblivious that they have construction defects, and maybe they think it's a maintenance issue, or they don't know at all. And so it is a terrible, terrible, terrible law that needs to be changed. And what's going to happen is this: you have a townhome project with 10 buildings and 200 units. The association gets turnover and finds that there are defects and brings claims within 7 years. But guess what? They lose the 10 buildings, they lose 5 of them because TCOs were issued beyond the 7 years. But as a townhome association, they still have to fix all of the buildings, all of them. So right off the bat, they've lost 50% of the recovery because of this terrible law that's in effect. So it is a terrible statute of repose that's going on in July 1. Everyone that advocates for owners of properties, including me, and I know Ben and Paul, is trying to educate owners that before July 1, 2024, inspect your project. 100% inspect your project. If there are anything that is materially wrong, immediately engage a lawyer to file a lawsuit before July 1, 2024. And I'll give you an example. A project came to us last week that two times before, a general counsel lawyer had brought it to me to represent the Townhome Association, and the board said, there's nothing wrong, we don't need you. Two different general counsel. A third one contacted me last week and said, hey, I just got this association. I said, I know the association. They've turned down it twice before. I go, but they can't turn it down now. They have 2 weeks before they lose all their claims. The 10-year runs, and none of that. If they didn't do anything, even there was some argument on July 1, they would be 100% too late. So they hired us. We filed a complaint on Friday, even though they were contacted us on Thursday, and we haven't had an expert look at it. We had somebody do a visual on it to preserve the claims before the claims were passed. But this new law on July 1, 2024 is going to be devastating for owners of properties. There's going to be shortfalls, and it's going to devastate owners. They're going to have to come out of pocket to pay for this. And it's a 100% windfall for developers, contractors, and insurance companies who all built and did their due diligence and insured under a 10-year window and now get the benefit of a 7-year shortened window. It's a windfall for them. So if one thing that comes out of this webinar today is be on your toes. Take a look at your project. Get somebody like Ben out there or somebody like Paul out there to look at your project. It doesn't cost you much to get them out there. And many people do it for free, initial look-see, a visual. Get them out there. Go to me. I'll arrange for a contractor and engineer to look at your project. We've got probably 24 that we're doing right now for communities that are aware of the July 1 deadline. So be on your toes because bad things are coming July 1.
Thank you, Philip. I think the key takeaway too is, and Ben, maybe you can speak on this, is get your buildings inspected. You have an opportunity at turnover to get inspections. Essentially, you can have an inspection done at any time, but certainly before the 7-year statute. And I think the message also is don't wait. And these projects, just historically, the ones I've been involved with, these are not just $100,000-$200,000, put some caulking on the building and, you're good to go. These are, reinforced concrete inside high-rise buildings, post-tension cables, elevated pool decks leaking, Central Florida, North Florida. We've taken off siding and stucco and entire elevation structurally, sheeting framing is gone. And these defects aren't always visible. And we have a slide, I don't know if we'll get to it, but what's behind the walls, it'll illustrate some of the things we find. But again, call an Epic, call a Volcanic, call me. We can come out and we can advise and we can do an inspection and we can collaborate and see what next steps are. And I know somebody in the chat, I think I answered it, but they wanted to know if the first step would be go to the developer to work on any defect claims. And again, just in the past, the builder developer, they're not going to want to do the repair that's needed. And we call it caulk and walk, just because that's generally what they want to do. They want to cover up the defects and get you to sign a release so it bars you from making a claim. So, what I tell people is that's probably wouldn't be my first step. I'd probably have an inspection by one of the panelists here. And then if it is decided that there are building deficiencies and a claim is filed, the builder always has the opportunity as part of the 558 process to come back and fix it. So if you're worried about him not having the opportunity, there's a built-in process for him to do that. And, usually they just thumb their nose at us and say, we're not doing it. But anyway, it is there for them to use. And so it probably would not be my first step. I hope that answered your question.
I would tack on to that as well, as even if it may be well-intentioned, ultimately just putting in fail safes of checks and balances is going to be in your best interest at the end of the day. Even during the 558 process, there are several steps even prior to filing a formalized lawsuit, if it does get there, that you can get a lot of progress done if you have an engaged developer and general contractor. So I know we've been talking about all the quote unquote death and devastation, if that's not the case, but I don't want to go ahead and just ignore that very apparent aspect of the process as well. I mean, that's really its intent, is to go ahead and normalize everything, have each and every homeowner act as one, to go ahead and not inundate the courts if it boils down to it. But those intermediate steps of providing the initial notice, of having a formalized walkthrough to show the opposing sides what issues were actually raised and included within the report, and allowing a back and forth to occur, at a minimum, will go ahead and narrow the available impasses that you may have. Because yeah, there will be some items that are going to be those innocent failures, right? Easy code violation is, all right, an outlet needs to be placed within 6 feet of an opening. What happens if it's 6.5 feet, right? I mean, things like that. How are they going to be addressed? Or low hanging fruit. If certain fire penetration is not sealed appropriately, that is like an easy one to go ahead and tackle. Just go ahead and put the fire sealant and let's just mark it off the list. So that at the end of the day, if you want to be in a position where you're only dealing with a handful or maybe 2 handfuls of large issues, right? Which are really going to boil down to just the feasibility and the overall price to get done. If these are multi-million-dollar issues, each one of those, a contractor is not going to be like, all right, cool, no problem. I'll show up. I got my whole staff. I pulled them off all my jobs. We'll see you Monday morning. No, it's not going to happen. Or, hey, $5 million. Oh, cool, no problem. Here's a check. It's not how these things work. So they're going to want to engage the insurance to go ahead and get things done. And that's where you're narrowed in your litigation. It makes it easier, and quite honestly, even it can potentially be cheaper, because you're having your engineer just focus on a narrowed amount of items. You're having your attorney only focusing on a narrowed amount of actual defendants. So it is a more streamlined process. We've actually had more than one scenario, definitely a few scenarios, where we've been able to take care of items pre-suit. It's the outside chance, don't get me wrong, but it is still absolutely possible in this day and age. And in those scenarios, we've gotten multi-million dollars worth of repairs done, but it wasn't under their schedule. It was through collaboration. We were able to assist and be the association's technical representative to review the design plans proposed for repair, provide commentary at the design phase, during the construction phase, and look at all the documentation from start to finish. That's what you want when you have these outside professionals on staff, or essentially on staff by way of extension. You don't want to lean on your property managers. You don't want to lean on your building maintenance supervisors to perform this task. They have more than enough on their plate already, taking care of the property and keeping it running. So, and even so, management companies aren't even insured for that type of work. So rely upon those individuals that are. Rely upon your engineer, rely upon your attorney to make the attorney decisions and all those notices. That's why we exist. And it's solely in the best interest of the association to get that done.
Thank you, Ben. So we're going to bring this to a close. And like I mentioned earlier, this could have been a 4 or 5 hour presentation. I think we actually got through half the slides, but you have my word. I'm going to invite Ben and Philip back, and maybe we can dive deeper into some of these issues and answer some more questions. But thank you for joining us. Next month, we do have a episode that we're going to talk a little bit more about the statute and how condominium and HOA homeowners and boards, what the process should be to have their buildings inspected. But any closing thoughts, Philip?
The one point I want to make sure and clear is that owners of any type of property should look at their properties on a regular basis and take a look at repeated maintenance issues in light of the new law changes that are coming in effect that are really putting up major hurdles on the ability of owners to bring claims for shoddy construction, that owners need to be very diligent and vigilant and take a look at their properties and get the right people to assist them to take a look at those properties, because the laws are changing. It used to be pro-consumer, pro-owner. It is now decidedly pro-developer, contractor, pro-insurance company. And because of this, you have to be ever more vigilant now and taking a look at your property and look at this and say, could there be something wrong here? If there is potentially, don't sit on your hands. Go out and get a professional, like Ben or Paul or me, to go take a look at your project. A lot of what we do is free up front, where we take a look at it to determine whether or not there is something there. And we can do that, but you have to do this, particularly with the laws that are changing and the new hurdles that they're being put on place. You have to be vigilant. And again, thank you for your time. I'm sorry we didn't hit on all the topic areas, but there's so much meat to this that we'll have another webinar and go into greater detail. And again, if you follow up questions, you have our contact information, you'll have it. Please contact us. We're all available to answer your questions after the fact. It's what we do for a living. Most of our work is educational, aside from litigating, is educating prospective clients and clients about what their rights are and the recoveries. So thank you all.
Any closing thoughts, Ben?
I think we've touched on a lot. I mean, this was, in short, I'd just say relying upon your professionals. Don't sit still. One good thing, at least with all recent legislation pertaining to like SIRS and milestones and things like that, is that, I mean, this year is going to be a big year for at least key components to be reviewed by an engineer, right? So this is an easy opportunity to go ahead and at least get a baseline understanding of how is your property looking, whether it's construction defect or not, right? I mean, get your physical every year, right? Plain and simple, get yourself a baseline. If you need to go ahead and do a blood test, do a blood test. Those are available. Rely upon your property maintenance staff to go ahead and put you in touch with the right individuals that are certainly been vetted by essentially corporate, and you have vendors list galore. So definitely rely upon those professionals. They're there for a reason. And yeah, this was a wonderful opportunity. I'm really thankful to be a part of it. And I look forward to the next one with you all. And yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Philip.
We
Peggy, I'm
appreciate
going to turn it over to you if you have any closing thoughts.
Well, gee, this is overwhelming, and I'm not even in a condominium, and this was by far the best presentation on all these points on this construction defect topic. So kudos to all three of you. So I just want to say thank you to everyone again. Besides it being outstanding, I want to mention that we do have some upcoming webinars besides what Paul's mentioning. I do have M2E Engineering bringing in Empower Works on February 27th. I also have a board certification class lined up, hopefully in February, no later than March. And that's because of all the board members that are coming in. You must be certified within 90 days of taking office. And that can be before, after, or during your 90 days of office, but you must be certified. I have fun coming up in March. I'm calling it the March Maintenance Madness Month. I'm featuring a couple of topics that have to do with maintenance. I'm talking about your maintenance team, not just maintenance on your building. We have a new class, as I mentioned earlier, by the Nuvo Elevator Company, with Erica getting certified for 2 classes, giving credits on that, March 13th and March 20th. So save the dates. And I want to say that we will be swinging into the hurricane time again for hurricane prep. So some classes will be coming up on that. And I want to say everybody stay warm, stay safe, and look forward to having you on our upcoming webinars real soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ron.
Bye.
Bye-bye.